Hello and welcome to All My Art and Soul, and I'm Michelle Holden, and this week is Abstract Art Journaling number 17, where I show you how I use my own images that I take around my area. I love nature, so let's see how this fits into this abstract journal page. So here I have again my favored tools, my 3 brushes, carpenter pencil, some other, these are just regular HB pencils. I think I will I will get some softer leads, my wonderful palette, which I am going to start using at the beginning with the gesso. And that is I guess it's just a dabber, a science dabber where you can, just take liquid and little drops in very precise measures. So I thought I would love to give those a try. And of course, my neutral collage, the black circle one is the regular brown butcher's paper. And that is a newsprint paper with that crackled stencil that you've seen me use. And the one before is regular copy paper soaked in coffee, not tea or anything. I haven't experimented with those. It has a nice rich color. And of course, that very transparent tracing paper. And there's my image. So a lot of my images I don't want to color because I want them to blend and be an actual element in themselves, as well as have, meaning or whatever the viewer might interpret to from the piece. But I want it to be part of, say, that background layer of gray, or maybe I want it to emulate or mirror or repeat some special marks that might have the feeling of those trees or whatever the feeling you get from that image. And again, my golden paints, my manganese blue, Titan buff, the gray, and what else am I going to show you here? I think that's it. So I'm keeping the palette really simple, and I think I'm really heading down that road of really simplifying things and more monochromatic work, just because of the feeling that I'm looking for. Everybody has, and you should, as you become clearer with what you're wanting to communicate visually, it does become easier. Easier with all the experiences you have with the different materials and tools, and as you start to gain experience and discern, of course, what you like and don't like. So I'm really loving, I don't even know how, I could never, if you tried to make marks like this, I couldn't. So the way the newsprint paper fades, and then as you can see, I've rolled this black across it at the end. I really like these papers the most. If you try too hard, I find it just looks like you try too hard, And that's the feeling I get too when I overuse stencils. I don't want to overuse the stenciling. I just want it to be or create a difference in the page, or that feeling again that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to be going over just with some plain white. I may mix it with the Titan buff, I'm not sure, just because the palette is there out of view. I usually bring it in, but it gets a little crowded. In there, so I thought I might zoom in on the page a bit more this week. And I like the movement and the feeling of those horizontal lines and dots that are in blue, the dots that are in orange, but I really wanted more of a gray, a neutral piece. So I thought, well, let's just keep a little keep keep it so you can just barely see them and just veil them with a thin layer of a white. And you'll see, and you probably do this too. You know this piece, you want to use it, it fits. It's just, it hasn't figured out how it wants to use it yet. So this is the balance of you with your intuition, or myself, and just that. Okay, I really want to use this. I might use it. I might not. So I let that dry, and I just needed to step away. And sometimes that's just the perfect thing that you need to do, just so you can give it some thought. And I'm really loving these dots. I think because they're more organic, and I like how they're just all different. So instead of using black, I chose a gray and just a slightly different value, a darker value, to go across this whole horizontal section here in the middle. And yes, I'm really liking how they show up. The contrast is more where it's white, and they're blending in below where it's closer to their value. And this is a thing that I might want to really keep in mind for future pages, even working in reverse, white on black, or a darker value on the white. So I made that little mistake. Of course, you can just grab that cloth right away. And right here, this is a photo. So I thought I'd show you. Already, I've got 5 different sections. Now they might stay, and it might become 3 or maybe 7. So we'll see. And they're slightly different from each other, but right now, if you notice, they were close to the same size. So that's what you don't want, or at least that's what I don't want. I want a variety, a thick, a wide section, very narrow, middle, and the more difference you have, of course, the more interesting to the eye it becomes. So again, still experimenting with that white paint, trying to find the perfect white paint for that perfect crisp edge, especially when I'm doing my hexagons. They're not bad. They're okay because the contrast is very low and you don't really notice, your eye doesn't stay there. So I do believe I changed this area. So if you're enjoying watching these videos, I hope you are also creating along with me. And don't forget to hop on over to my Facebook page, Facebook group, and there's some really, really interesting sharing going on over there. And of course, the link is in the description. So at the top, I noticed it just was too empty, but I just loved the lightness. So I thought, okay, what don't I have on this page? I don't have any pencil marks yet. So that's what I did. And for a second, you can sort of step back and just ask yourself, okay, what do I have? What do I don't have? That you like, of course, out of your choices that you're going to use. So I'm noticing these organic dots they create an interesting shape in that they're in a pattern of 8, but I'm probably, oh yes, I went to go and get some other paint. Oh, a new sponge, a fresh sponge. So I chose gray just because I didn't want the contrast so high, but still it really pops out. But I'm doing this on purpose because I know, like this, I'm going to be covering it with a neutral piece of tissue paper collage. It just, I noticed this image or cloud or whatever you want to call it. I have it in a lot of my work. And if you didn't hop on over to my website, there's there's a painting called Transcendence. It's there's Time Traveler. There's a few of those where I've used the clouds or a thin piece of paper disappearing into, it's like another surface or dimension or density going in. So there's, you know, it's sort of a thing that I'm wanting to express. So I put that image down the bottom because I knew it was going there and I planned that right from the beginning. Just didn't know how it was going to look around, and I was wondering about the scale. As you can see earlier, I trimmed it a little bit just because it was just too much. So I didn't want to make it like a small square in the middle like I've been doing. I wanted it to live in this area below. And I love how the dark landscape of the image blends into the dark. And I'm really liking this effect. Now, looking at this now, I may even have extended some of the branching lines past the image onto and up through some of the area or this page. And I still might do that, but it might be too much. So I'll have to give that some careful thought. So knowing that some of the areas, as I said earlier, were all the same size, I decided to make this very narrow and go across the bottom of all of my my rows of dots. And not bad. I might have wanted to maybe move that row of circles a little lower, but then it would have crowded the image area. So you just, you have to take what you have and just work with it. So let's see how this is going to look. Yes, so I'm still experimenting with, yes, and the lower, closer to the black, the better. And of course, I got some black paint on my brush, no big deal. But be careful with copy paper before it's covered with a gloss medium. It is really absorbent, so you don't even want to have your brush wet, just damp, before you're putting that layer of, it can be heavy gloss, it can be matte gloss, it doesn't matter. And then you want to wait for it to dry just to protect that, even if you plan to put another layer on top, because it does absorb differently from the rest of the layers that are around it. So just as long as you know that, you just keep that in mind. So that will dry, and I don't know if I use my dryer to dry it or speed it up. It depends what you're doing that day. You might be multitasking, let it dry, go do something else, come back to your page. But then you might not want to ruin your flow. That's what you also have to consider. So I don't mind this shape. I don't like cut. I like torn. It just looks more natural. It's a little bit, but I really, it's a little bit, thought out. But it's not, but I just love how the neutral goes so thin over that layer, and you can still see the marks. And maybe I would have made those dots a little less dark. But then I realize this is this handcrafted paper. Now I used the circle punch with it. As you can see, the edges are a little rough because it's such a thin piece of paper. But liking how thin that is, but it disappears a little bit. So that's why I moved it up. And not liking the two dot circles that are inside the white circle. So I might even use another white circle stamp on top of that so that I'm not going to interfere with the composition, but it'll still cover those two dots that look like eyes, because now I notice that. And I know some of you, you'll notice things that I don't notice because I'm in the flow. I'm trying to, it's such an interesting balance. So what am I doing here? So sometimes, well, what I'll say is, when I'm recording my voiceover, which I'm doing right now, and I'm using iMovie when I do this. So the part that says recording or stop is always right over the bottom of my page where I'm working at. So sometimes I have to sort of guess what am I doing? So you'll see that I generally know what I'm doing because I created the page. So funny. So here is the China marker. So this black with these lines going down, I'm trying to create this energy that's going, how do I want to say, up and down, coming down and then going up. So it's sort of climbing and descending. And it helps the viewer's eye in and around the page. I'm sure there's some other marks that you could create to help that, but we're good. That's why this is just a journal page. It's a format for exploring, and that's why I love art journaling so much. So now I'm going to take this Q-tip. Exactly. So I went along the outer edge, of course, knowing this now. What might have worked better would have been using that circle stamp that I like to use, going inside the circle, which I probably still could. It'd just be too many circles, but who knows. And then you would be covering those two dots that are in the middle that are sort of distracting, holding the viewer's eye, but it's a sort of a cool idea. So then I decided let's put some white contrast on the bottom just to change it up, but being careful not to add too many of those. So I've sort of grabbed a selection of these little pieces at the side, which I always like to have on the right. And I'm deciding, should I just leave it monochromatic? And I think I do. And I think the only other change is adding those white dots that you barely see at the top, but are just enough to catch the eye and go across. So I'm really liking that effect. Definitely will keep that in mind. And don't forget to go through your pages and make your notes and make sure you're remembering the things that make a note of things that really worked well. So we're sort of coming to the end. I've got the dryer out, and we're just making sure things are secure, things are drying. I'm adjusting the temperature of this little dryer. It was just a cheap little dryer, but I really like it now. It's just handy. It's right beside me all the time. Have to be careful not to blow all my little collage pieces everywhere. My dog, his name is Dexter. He's getting used to this dryer that I take out. And where he sits, it's on the stairwell to my left of this big table that I work at. And he'll sort of sit there, look, sit, and watch me create. It's sort of funny. Now, of course, those white circles or those dots, they're going to take a while to dry. A dryer just can't dry them like that because they're so thick. So I decide these are just blowing everywhere. So now I'm just going to move them. And this time I use the white tape, which is pretty cool. I finally found some of the yellow tape that, what's his name? One of my mentors, Art to Life, Nicholas Wilton uses. So I should be. Now, it's not the super wide one, but it'll definitely stick less. And so at the top, we have a big wide one layer, 1, 2, 3, 4, mostly 5 or 6 that we see. I'm liking. I'd like it better if it was an odd number, but that's okay. So leave a comment. Let me know what kind of pencils that you like to use, and how are your layers coming along? Your layering process. Have you tried the tissue paper yet? And if not, give it a try. Oh, I do not know why I needed to do this. I wanted to push that layer back one more time, I guess. But note, I'm using the same value. So whatever you do when you're using the same or very close value, you can't mess it up that much, because it's now you're doing the subtlety, and not the big conversation, the small conversation. Oh, here we go. I realized that, well, I showed this dabber tool, but I didn't use it. So on the sides, so giving some symmetry to this piece, instead of the gray, which I sort of liked and could have left, but of course I didn't. And my initial idea was to let those drip down and to somehow emulate. So I'm just using the back of that. See, it's newsprint, it soaks it up. So they didn't really do anything except make black blobs. So if anything like that happens, just dry it and then go right back to the previous layer that you have and cover it again. This time I just left it. And in the future, if I turn the page and look at it again, I'll go, oh, okay, I didn't really like that. They're very distracting. And if you cover it with not such an opaque layer, what you leave behind might really be interesting, especially if you let the little peaks of black, little pieces peek out. So I noticed I wanted it in threes with the neutral. There's neutral on the top, neutral on the bottom. I might have gone, that's with the nickel azo. I think I would have preferred closer to a color of the brown paper that's going across in the middle with the circles on it. But sort of liking that. It took the squareness away and warmed it up. It doesn't really affect it much. It brings the eye down on that right side and makes it go around. But I do believe the too black, or the black section that I just put in with the ink, I could cover up with some gray, just because I notice the eye likes to stay there a little bit longer instead of going back up and around. So again, adding that little subtle interest just with this, the little sprinkle, and I'm hoping to get some in the darker areas and a little bit on that transparent tissue paper, the neutral tissue paper up there. I might use a little bit of black. Yes, it just needed a little dusting of black dots over the top, but not too much. I really let it be subtle this time. Perfect. Okay. And of course, those can smudge very easily, so you really need to make sure those are dry. I do, because if I go back to the area or brush my hand across, they're going to smudge, and And what you intended to be subtle is not subtle anymore. So this is an 11 by 14 mixed media Canson pad. I forget the weight. You can get them at different weights. I know my Of Earth and Sky was the heavy watercolor. This is the lighter one, and then there's one in between with the mixed media paper that's slightly smaller, and I'm going to be moving to that very, very soon. So if any of you here are members of my Facebook group, our Facebook group, thank you very much. I do plan to have some workshops coming up in the very near future. I'll be creating those during my Christmas holidays. I know it's a very busy time of year for everyone, but it's always important to take some time for yourself, even if it's just a half hour here or there. So here comes the big edge of reveal here. I may or may not have... Oh yes, this is the one where oh no, it's got a crisp edge on it. Oh, and I know the other side does not, because I just grabbed my brayer from the previous palette and rolled it across. But now I practically know where the edge goes. So I just added a little white to that edge just to take that away. I could have used my painting tool to make a really straight line. I have to keep that in mind for next time. And I love the idea of using imagery with the paint and with the collage. There's a feeling there because we can all relate to this image. Yes, it will mean something different to each of us, but it's a very recognizable image that can be, used in your art pieces. I really love it. So, thank you for watching this video. I hope this one really helps you with your different composition areas, using your own images and different layers. And, oh, here comes the finger. Wait, hold on, I need to do one more thing. And I don't understand what I was doing, but it was very subtle. I just needed some curly lines through there. They didn't really need to be there, and I'm sort of glad that the marker was almost out and dry. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.